Hello, and welcome to Spaminar, the Society of Prop Managers webinar series for live theater prop professionals. I'm Ben Homan, Vice President of SPAM and Props Director at the Utah Shakespeare Festival for the last 30 years. The Society of Props Managers, formerly and affectionately known as SPAM, was formed in 1994 by a small group of prop professionals in the Midwest to address issues of common importance and to create parity with other production departments. Today, we are an association of 150 plus professional prop managers and educators from not-for-profit producing organizations, opera companies, and educational institutions. We built an international communication and support network that shares resources, information, solutions, and techniques, as well as safety information, continuing education, and stock. As with previous Spaminars, we're requesting a pay-what-you-can donation to help support this programming and our annual grants for early career prop professionals. If you can afford to donate, links to donate will be in the chat. We truly appreciate any help you can give. We've enabled live transcription for this webinar. If you'd like to use them, click on the live transcript buttons on the bottom and then select Show Subtitle. Alternatively, you can click View Full Transcript to see it in the meeting side panel. I'm joined tonight by Liz Baehr, Props Manager for the Resident Ensemble Players at the University of Delaware, to hear about how we can use Airtable to help us organize our props, shops, and stock. Liz has been a member of SPAM for 14 years and is currently the Secretary and member of the Communications and Grants Committees. She's also a fiber artist and small business owner with a home studio making accessories and home decor. Liz, I turn it over to you.
Hi, I'm Liz. I started using Airtable a couple years ago and have increased gradually the amount of things that I use it for. So I'm hoping to share some of those things with you guys. None of the things we're going to show are necessarily the only way to do anything. Airtable's a tool and you can set it up any way you want. I view it as more of a thing to add to your tool belt instead of a replacement for something like Excel or Google Sheets. There will be times where Excel or Google is going to be the better option. And there's times where Airtable is going to work better. We wanted to do a quick poll to see how many people are familiar with Airtable. So I think the host is going to set that up. And so we can see sort of what the general experience is. And then I can get into it. We're going to do kind of an overview of a lot of different ways to use it and a brief introduction to it, but we're not really going to go into the nitty-gritty of how to set everything up because we'd be there for a very long time. There are tons of YouTube videos and tutorials online, so when you're setting yours up, a lot of times you just go into YouTube and search for what you're trying to do, and there's usually someone who has shown how to do it. That's mostly how I learned. It looks like most people have never used Airtable. So that's good to know. So I'm going to share my screen. And get us started with this. So Airtable is a relational database. It looks like a spreadsheet in some formats, but it functions more like a database. And the way that that is super helpful for prop stuff is that you can have different pieces of information that all relate back to the same thing. So rather than having a to-do list and a shopping list and all of your separate pieces on different lists, it can all be part of the same information and you're not having to duplicate things or copy them over. It's just all there in one place. The one thing to be aware of is some of the ways in which it's not like Excel or a Google Sheet. In Excel, you can set up a spreadsheet where different rows and different columns might relate to different things. You might section off pieces to do different calculations, but in Airtable, on each table, everything has to be part of the same information relationship. So you have your columns, which you have multiple choices for how to format that column, but that applies to the whole column. No matter how many rows you add, that formatting always applies to that column. So if you're doing calculations or something like that, it's always going to be the same calculation. Now the rows are similar in that every row relates to what they call a record. So this first row is a record for this one item, and the first column of that row is always the name for that record. So everything in that row relates back to the same record. In Airtable, like in Excel, you can have multiple tables in one base. A base is what they call a database, and they give you a main page where you can have what they call workspaces, which are basically just different folders to keep your different bases in and as a way to keep things organized. If you get into the paid plans, the workspaces come into play a little bit more, because when you pay for a paid plan, it only applies to the workspace that you've paid for, which gets a little tricky. But we're mostly looking at stuff that's in the free plan today, because you can do a lot without having to upgrade to a paid plan. Let's see. On each table, you can have multiple views. The views are just a different way to look at the same pieces of information. So you can filter down the information, you can hide columns, you can move columns around. It doesn't change the core information, but it adjusts how you view it so that you can see what you need to see at any given time. For example, on this props list that I have up, I have a different view for the stage managers that has it condensed down to really just what they need to see so that they don't get distracted or overwhelmed by all of the other information. I have a view for questions, I have views for tasks, all kinds of different things. These are all a grid view, which is viewing it like a spreadsheet. But you can also have, I don't have that set up on this one, you can have a Kanban view, which arranges things by cards, and you can group them by different things. You can also have a calendar view where you can put things onto a calendar based on a column in your field where you assign dates. It could be a due date, it could be a date that something's going to happen. And this is new, so I haven't had a lot of time to play with this. They've just introduced a list view where you can sort things. They also have a gallery view, lots of different ways to view the same information. And you can do everything, you can have all the views for all your own views. You can allow your team members to have their own views, or you can set up a view to set up how they see the information. You can also share a view to share it with someone who isn't using Airtable. And so that gives them a link to a website that's just a simple view. They can still filter it, sort it, but they can't change any of the information. So it allows them to see the information without having to worry about them changing anything, or it helps control what they can see to some extent. And they don't have to worry about knowing Airtable. They just basically need to be able to view a spreadsheet. And in these views, you can still filter things. So if I wanted to filter this to only things that are incomplete, I can select those options. I can group things by character and sort them by page. There's all kinds of different ways to filter and sort the information, but it doesn't change it, it just rearranges it so that you can see easily what you need to see. You can create as many views, as many share links as you want. You can also share a base with someone if you want to collaborate with them directly. There are some limits with the free plan of how many people you can have as editors, and if you have a large team, that can be a little tricky to navigate, but there are usually pretty good ways to work with it. So this base that we're looking at is a props list for a show that I did last year that I sort of took a snapshot of mid-build so that we could see where all kinds of things were happening. When you set up a base, the first thing you have to do is set up your columns to say what kind of information they're going to have. So you can have single select fields where you can select one option from available options, which shows up like this. You get a drop down and you can pick an option. You can also have a multiple select where you can select multiple options for one field. You can have number fields. You can have fields that relate to other tables. So this field with questions is actually relating to another table that has all the questions in it, where I can have more pieces of information about each of those questions. And it can be a little tricky sometimes to figure out if you want to add information into your primary table or if you want to split it out into another table. But the main way to think about it is if you have one piece of information that you need to have multiple things attached to, you probably need a new table. Or if you have one piece of information that you need to attach to multiple things in the other direction, you might need a new table that you can link. Linking is pretty easy. It's just a couple button clicks. That is the real advantage to Airtable in that it's all customizable. It can be a little overwhelming at first, but you can make it whatever you need it to be. And they make it a lot easier than Excel or Google Sheets, because with those you often have to have really complicated formulas and multiple cells that are doing things in the background, whereas Airtable really sets it all up where you just click a couple buttons and you can set up what you need to do. You can change color formatting on buttons. So like on this field, I have lots of different options that I can select, and I've chosen to have the ones that I need to catch my eye in colors, and then the other ones less colorful so that I can see what's there. You can have a form that leads into your base. So for example, this is an add a prop form where you just have a link that you can send to somebody and they get this form and they can fill it out and it gets added into your database. It's really useful for inventories. I also have one set up for receipt tracking where you can just take a picture of a receipt, attach it to the thing, send it, and you can do it right from your phone. It makes receipt tracking really easy. What are the other forms I have? I have an add a question form where the stage managers can add a question if they want to ask something. Typically they just ask me or put it in notes, but it's there. We haven't used it. And this prop base is really built out with a lot of options, but I only use as many of them as I need for any particular show. So I might not use everything on here for every show. This is set up, so I've got a table for questions. There's a table for tasks that need to get done, which can be viewed by this card view that lets me see what's assigned to each person on the staff. And you can drag and drop things from one person to another. and see what the to-do lists are. I have mine set up so that the name is put together from other columns. So it's a formula field that takes information from other columns and makes a name out of it. So it puts who it is and it puts what prop it's for as the label, which means that when we're in the team view, if I move something from one person to the other, it changes the name in that record, which when you get into the calendar view is important so that you can see who's doing what on what day. In this view, you can also drag and drop things around. So you can change the day that things are happening. You can move things around. You can go forward, backwards in time. It's really helpful for visualizing your calendar. I have a shopping list where things get added that we need to shop for. Everything relates back to the first table with the props list though. So there's a column where you select what prop that's for. On this view, there's a column to select the prop. The same with rehearsal notes. I can copy and paste from the rehearsal port into this document and it puts all the notes in, and then I can assign them to the prop that they apply to and put their status in, or if nothing needs to be done on them, so that they then show up in the main views where I can see the notes in relation to the prop and in the tasks that need to happen to see everything that needs to happen on a prop. The other way you can filter the information is you can group things. So in this view of tasks, if I group it by prop, it will show each prop and then all of the tasks that need to happen for that prop. And you can do that with people. You can have it show all the tasks that are assigned to a person. There's a lot of different ways to group. You can group by just about any field. And it's helpful to see see information in a different way. And let's turn that off. I also have set up order tracking. And this is one of the really cool things about Airtable is that it has a lot of integrations with other systems and other software. So this table is set up with an automation that when an email gets put into a folder in my email, it creates a record in the Airtable, and then based on what the content of that email is, it can mark it as shipped or delivered. It's not 100% foolproof, but it's pretty close. I'm still dialing in these things, but it's really helpful to have it automatically fill in each order. And then I have a line where I can see all the different status to see where something is in process. My dream is to figure out a way to have it automatically update from the tracking number, but I haven't figured that out yet. For budgeting, you can have similar things where you can sort things by prop. You can assign things, have all of your different numbers that you calculate. I have tables for consumable calculations and build calculations, and those all relate into the budget table so that those numbers are all there when you're budgeting and working on your budget. And then this is what's called a synced table. So this table actually lives in a different base, but you can connect it to this base to sync that information in. On the free plan, you can only sync in one base at a time. on the paid plans, you can do multiple ones, so you have to decide what you want to sync in. So this is one option where you can sync in your expenses. I have another option where I have it synced up with the inventory database. So when you're assigning things to the show, you can select things that are in your inventory and have the information from the inventory copied over. So what that looks like is when I select something from my inventory here, it gets added, and whatever information I have on it gets added in. Let's see if I can select something. So if I have the dimensions, they get added in, the picture gets attached, and it can be really useful. The other thing that you can link in is I have another table where I set up an order tracking log for multiple shows at one time. So every order that comes in gets put into one log, and then that gets sunk to a table so that you can track multiple shows at a time. That gets a little trickier with the free plan because it gets a little harder to keep the connections you need to keep for that. But it's really useful to be able to, I have another base with all of the expenses that we have in a season. They get tagged with show names, and then they each go into that show's base. So then I have a view of what that show has spent. With Airtable operating a little bit differently from Excel, you can't have the same fields in cells where you would have a total show up, like you might on your normal budget sheet, but Airtable kind of does it for you automatically. There's always a tab at the bottom that shows the total of what is visible at that time. And if you filter it, it will show the total to what you filtered to. So it updates as you go. You can also, when you have things grouped, it will show you totals based on each group. So you can see what was spent on each prop in addition to what was spent on the whole show, which is down here at the bottom. Another helpful thing that Excel can't do is you can add attachments to a record. So you can, like I showed in the inventory piece, you can have inventory pictures. You can also attach design information and design drawings. So if I go to, sorry, it's in this one. So this shows all of the design information and the design drawings that each of these records has. You can attach multiple attachments to one record. So when you open it up, if there are more than one attachment, you can scroll through them. When you click on a record to open it up, it lets you see all of the information that you have about that record. So it's a really useful way to see everything in one place. It can be also overwhelming to have all of the information, but you can add links, you can link to other tables, you can do all kinds of fun things with those. So something that Airtable has released fairly recently are interfaces where you can design this custom view of your information with charts and graphs and whatever you need it to show. So this one is set up to kind of do workload visualizations. So it can show you where all the props in the show are in status and what's completed, what's handed off, what's cut, all that kind of stuff. And you can also filter those by people so that you can see what each person, what their workload looks like in terms of what's completed and what has yet to be completed. If you add time estimates onto tasks, then you can see a column that adds up all of the time that is assigned to one person in their tasks, so you can see if the workload is balanced. You can also set it up to show your budget, to show what's spent, what's allocated, what's left to spend. You can set these up to show different parts of your base in a grid, but just a focused view. So this has just the things that need to get pulled, the notes or tasks that need to be completed, a shopping list, just little snapshot views of things so that you can see at a glance a lot more information. And then you can also add in a calendar. These are all totally customizable. It's really easy to edit. You can drag and drop things around. You can change how something's viewed from a graph to whatever you want it to be. Lots of different ways to visualize the information. You can also set this up as sort of a prop by prop view of the show. So I can scroll down through whatever prop I want to find a piece of information about and then see everything that I know about that prop. All of the rehearsal notes, all of the order tracking, links, everything related to that prop all shows up in one place. Which was my main goal because I was tired of copying information from list to one place to another. So, let's see. You can also set up a list. Let's see, where's that? To bring multiple shows in to one place. So this base is set up to sync in from 3 different Airtable bases for 3 different shows. This particular thing is on the paid plan, so you can't quite do it on the free plan, but I'm just showing it as an example of something that could be done. So this brings in from 3 different show bases. So we have YB all task, we have department all tasks, and we have Crucible all tasks. So they all come in and they all get added to one base and one table so that can then see across all the shows that are happening who has what things assigned to them, all that sort of information, and it shows which show or task that's assigned to. So let's see, we looked at this data already. So inventory is another way where it can be super useful because you can attach photos, you can attach multiple photos, and you can have these gallery views where you can view things based on the pictures. You can customize what you can see with the picture. So this one has different pieces of information where you can click on what you want to see. So I want to see if it's out on rentals, all that sort of stuff. You can, in this grid view, you can see all of the information for them. It's pretty easy to tag things with different names, to add different locations, tag it with a show that it was used in. You can add multiple pictures. There is a data limit on the free plan. I can't remember what the latest version of it is exactly, but one of the workarounds a lot of people have found is to just make a different database for different categories. So you might have one category for furniture that's its own database, and then you have another database that's rugs, and another database that's lighting. And it's not too hard to manage them that way. Obviously, it's easier if they're in one place, but it's not too bad. And that allows you to share things with people outside by using this share view, where whichever view you're in, you can click and share it. So if I wanted to share this gallery view, I can share that link with them, and then they can see this view, which they can also filter and sort by all of those same things. And that is determined by what information is showing at that time on the cards. So if the view like this has more information, when you share it, you get more options for filtering. So here I can filter by size, I can filter by quantity, I can search by tags. So if I want to see everything that's wood, I can click on that. So that's helpful for sharing with designers, that people who want to rent. You can set this up with barcode columns. If you're doing a lot of rentals and you have barcodes, you can do that. You can also set up rental records where you can see what a theater has borrowed and see what places have borrowed in the past, and sort your inventory based on what's out on rental, what's in, what needs repair, all sorts of things like that. And you can customize it to your heart's content. This is another sample of a database from another theater. Super helpful. This one is a sample of a paper prop archive that we're building to collect all of the different paper props we built into one place. So we're able to add pictures, we're able to tag it with the year, with the country, with the show, whatever information, to be able to find it at a later time. And then this is a script database. So you can add a link to where it's from, you can add information about characters, synopsis, you can attach the script right to the record so people can read it or they can download it. This is what the public view would look like when you share it. So let me get back to this one. And I'm actually going to open us up for questions a little bit early because I think we might have multiples.
Well, yeah, if anyone has questions, throw them in the chat. I have two to start with.
Yep.
So in the free version,
Yes.
is there a limit to the number of bases you can have?
No. So you can have as many bases as you want. There's a limit to the number of records you can have in a base, but you can have lots of bases.
And do you know what that number of records is?
I think they just raised it. It was 1,200. It might be a little bit higher now. Somewhere around there.
Okay.
Anybody else? I know I sped through a lot, so I'm happy to go back and show things again if anybody needs to see something again.
Stacy asks, in the free version, have you found that you lose info over time?
No. They will warn you if you're approaching your limit on a base, and they don't delete it. They have a pretty good grace period. I actually haven't really found out what happens if you don't remove the data. I think you just stop being able to add new data. All of the records have a revision history that when you open this up, this doesn't have anything, but you can show the revision history and show what's changed. So I haven't experienced losing any data.
Okay. Karen says she believes it's 2,000 now records per base.
Yep.
Katie asks, you mentioned YouTube being a good resource for learning Airtable. Do you have any specific channels or videos that you recommend?
So we're going to be sending out a sheet after this with a list of helpful links. So that'll be in that list.
And Karen just put that in the chat. And we'll also be coming out with the feedback survey that you'll get after the spam.
And I'm also going to put in the chat a link to sign up for Airtable. It's a referral link, so we do get a little thing for every person that signs up, but it helps us keep the spam thing running. So if you want to use that, that's there. Any other questions?
Anybody? Come on, ask some questions. This is exciting, interesting.
So,
have you found other designers and coworkers to be welcoming of this interface? It looks fab to me, but wondering, and then they sent it.
it's a bit of mix. For the most part, the stage managers have been pretty on board with it. Coworkers, it's a mix. And it's helpful to sort of ease them in because you can send them those links to where they can just view the information and kind of get used to it a little bit. What I found is that I kind of have to be the Airtable person, and I mostly do changes and keep everything up to date, and then everyone else mostly just views the information.
Right. At what point do you recommend changing to a paid version? And can you, I mean, I know there's a bunch of different levels of paid version. Can you give us like just a little overview?
Yep. Let me get back to that. So they do have multiple levels of paid. I can't remember where it is. And they all relate to the number of records that you can have, the amount of data that you can have, the number of tables synced together. Automations, you have a certain number you can use in a month. And the one thing that we haven't talked about are extensions, which are all these things that you can add in. And I personally, even with all of the things I've set up, I have only scratched the surface of what Airtable can do. It can interface with so many other programs and so many things outside of Airtable, Zapier, and all of these other things that I haven't gotten into all of that. But it's super flexible.
Okay. Can an inventory be shared via a company's website for other companies to access for rental purposes?
Yep. So when you get that share link for an inventory, let me open one back up. Nope, that's not it. But when you get a share link, it gives you a bit of code that you can embed into a site. So you can embed that table in a website and it will still be searchable, it will still be filterable, and they can access from another website.
Okay, awesome. Sharon asks, can you use Airtable to keep an inventory with UPC or QR codes?
Yep. As one of your options, you can add codes, barcodes, and different things.
Okay. Awesome. Todd says he's currently using Stage Stock, but he's thinking of replacing it with Airtable. Do you know anything about Stage Stock?
I don't really know much to be able to compare them.
Okay.
But we are talking about doing that later.
That's true. We are talking about possibly doing one of these in the fall, comparing multiple different inventory systems. If you're interested in that, fill out the survey when you get it after the Spaminar, and we will take that into consideration. If there are multiple editors, are you notified that something's been revised, or do you have to check the revision history?
There are ways to set it up so that you are notified, but you're not necessarily automatically notified.
Okay. Katie asks, how long did it take to get Airtable functional for your shop?
So I don't really know because I really started digging into Airtable in 2020 when there was nothing happening. Um, but it didn't take me too long to just get a basic props list functional in Airtable. And then I've just added functions over time to build on what I started with. So I wouldn't recommend going in and trying to do everything all at once. If you go in and you create a base, you can import your data from a regular Excel spreadsheet. So this is an old show. You can make adjustments there if you need to and import it. And it will automatically set it up with a lot of the fields that you need already. So it's really easy to add something in. And if you start there and then just start figuring out what functions you need, that's the best way to do it for me.
Okay, awesome.
You can also, sorry, you can import from other systems as well. From Google Sheets, if you have a CSV file, which you can get places like FileMaker and other things to export as a CSV. So you can do that, and then you can also add tables from all kinds of other sources.
Okay, awesome. Melissa asks, when you start a new show, do you duplicate a base from a past show, or
Yeah.
you do? Okay.
So you can, from your main view, you have the option to duplicate it, and you can have it, you tell it not to duplicate the record, so it automatically makes it blank when you make a new one.
Okay, awesome.
The only thing, when you do that, you sometimes have to reconnect some of your things that are connected. If you have it syncing or updating based off email, you just have to click through and confirm those connections.
Okay. Ryan asks, does your setup show how many of each prop are available on a given day for rental?
I think that you can set it up to do that. Mine doesn't, but I believe you can.
Okay. Karen asks, as a follow-up to the question earlier about getting it functional in your shop, how long does it take you to keep all your tables updated? Basically, how does it affect your timetables and workflow?
So I've actually found that it takes less time than it used to when I had the props list and my shopping lists and other to-do lists, because everything is connected. So it doesn't take me more time now that it's functional, if that answers that question.
Okay. And then I have a question about the way it relates to like the task list for people in your shop.
Mm-hmm.
Are you just creating a view for them that they can look at on their phone on a website, or do they all have Airtable on their phone?
So it can be either way. They can have Airtable on their phone, they can look at this list through Airtable, or you can share the view with them. You can have people assigned as a collaborator if they've joined Airtable, where you can tag them directly in things, but you kind of can't have a mix of that. And so I have mine set up without them directly attached, and just have their name as a person rather than when you're doing your field setup, one of the ones you can select is a collaborator or user field, and you can tag people directly as long as they've joined your database.
Okay. And then in the share view, every time you update it, it automatically updates whatever they're looking at.
Mhm.
Okay.
It automatically updates everything here. It updates all the views. It updates anywhere it's linked. As long as, like, if they haven't refreshed their page, it might not show until they refresh, but
Right.
it's automatically updated.
Okay. Um, and are you able to view this easily via a mobile device for shopping and that kind of stuff?
Yep. And one thing I recommend for that is making yourself a view to look at, because you can't see a huge number of columns on the mobile, but you can set it up to see just what you need to see. And you can have all your lists accessible. You can make edits too from your phone through the app.
Okay. Awesome. Any other questions? That was a good volley back and forth there. Last call for questions. So previously, did you have an inventory before you started Airtable, or did you start the inventory with Airtable?
We have experimented with a couple different ways to have our inventory. We had the usual pictures in folders. Before I started, they had tried starting a FileMaker database. I've done ones online with photos in photo albums. So I've had different iterations.
And what, in your mind, this version is better because
It's more intuitive and more user friendly than FileMaker. And it's certainly better than pictures in folders because of the searchability and the filter options, where you can filter down to what you need, where you have information attached to things like you would in FileMaker. It's just a lot easier to set it up.
Okay. Cool. Any last questions? You have a minute or two left.
I did find the pricing info.
Great. Share that, and we'll see if anyone else, if anyone comes up with more questions.
So this is the basics of the pricing info. The thing to know is that they have discounts for educators and for nonprofits, which are basically 50% of these. So it's about half. And it gets a little tricky because when you get a plan, it only applies to a workspace. And then you can only have a certain number of collaborators on that workspace because you pay per collaborator. But if people are only viewing it, they don't count as a collaborator. So this kind of shows you a little bit of what the limits are.
Okay. And that's at airtable.com/pricing. Want to look that up, anyone? Karen asked, do you give access to your full inventory to designers, or can you narrow the inventory down to only show them a portion of the stock?
You can definitely narrow it down. So you can make, let me get back to, you can make a view for a designer, or just have a designer view where you can select exactly what you want them to see. You can filter it. So if you don't want them to be able to see things that are out on rentals, you can tell it to not show anything that's on rentals. If you have things that need to be repaired, you can tell them not to show them that. There's all kinds of ways to do that. You can also set up with a view and a wish list where they can click a check mark and it gets added to the wish list. So it gets added over here.
Okay. So I think that might have answered, U of M just asked, how can a designer earmark what they want if they're just a viewer?
So they have to do it in this interface view. They can't do it in the regular shared view, because in that view you can only view things. You can't make any changes.
So does that make them a collaborator?
I actually don't know the answer to that right now because they just made the option to share interfaces with people who aren't haven't joined your base an option like 2 weeks ago. So I haven't
Try this.
figured out exactly what that is yet.
Okay.
And that's the other thing is they are constantly adding features and things. Like the last time we did this, I think in 2020, where we introduced Airtable, you couldn't sync bases to each other. You couldn't link things up. And not too long after that, they released that option. So if there's something that you can't do, it might be coming.
Cool.
And sorry, just
Yep,
one more follow on to that is that you can set up a form for rental requests where they can note which numbers they want. They can add those things to a list, and then they can fill out the rest of the information, and it gets sent to you as a request in your database.
Okay. And Todd is asking, like, how granular is your inventory? Do you just have furniture? Do you have hand props? Are you adding hand props as you pull them for shows?
I'm building it. It's less built out than I want it to be. But I have some furniture, I have some lighting, I have some rugs. I have not done all of my hand props. The next thing I'm doing is weapons. It's
okay. So it's in process. Karen asked, having as much experience as you do with Airtable, what do you think is the best entry point for someone with little experience? Would it be a props list or starting on an inventory, or is there like some other form or something simple that they could kind of test it out and get a feel for it before they sort of dive in on full bore?
I mean, I think an inventory would be pretty easy to start with because it's not as relational. Like you don't have to have it relate to other tables. You're basically just filling in the options on grid view. And I've given this to students and had them update things. I've had them take measurements and then add them in, that add pictures. It's really just drag and drop for adding pictures. One thing is if you haven't built the records yet, you can drag a whole bunch of pictures in at once, and then it'll create a record for each of those pictures. And a props list, if you're just going with a basic props list that like you would upload from Excel, it's pretty easy to work with that like you would in Excel, and then gradually learn to add the features that you want it to have.
Okay, that makes sense. Awesome. Okay. Oh, this is a beautiful setup. You should hire yourself out to build databases for other theaters, says Ryan.
It has occurred to me. Figure out how to sell this prop Bible.
Karen seconds that.
I'm available in the summer.
There you go. Awesome. Any last things? Oh, last question, as you add stuff to an inventory, do you eventually see the need for staff to support it?
To maintain the digital inventory or to be a stock manager, I guess. I mean, maintaining the digital stuff is pretty easy, really depending on how much you do as rentals and borrows and all that kind of stuff.
Right. Yeah, I would agree. Our inventory system, we use a FileMaker based system, and now that it's all in there, maintaining it is fairly easy. But when we do rentals, sometimes I'm like, man, I wish I had somebody who could just run the warehouse.
It's all set up so that or it's not set up, it can be set up so that you can have whatever information you need to mark things that need new photos, or mark things that are blocked out for a show, or whatever you need to do, essentially.
Okay. Cool. Well, thank you, everyone. And thanks, Liz, for a fun and informative evening. Just as a reminder, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Links are going to pop up in the chat. Now, get your Sharpies out and mark your calendars. Upcoming Spaminars, the rest of our spring season, March 26th, Stage Firearms and Safety with Jim Guy. April 16th, Animatronics with Eric Hart. May 21st, Puppet Building with Nikki Koulis, and June 18th, Health and Wellness with the Spam Anti-Oppression Committee. If you're interested in joining Spam and are a working prop manager, director, supervisor, master, or some similar title in a nonprofit theater, opera company, or children's theater, or are an educator who teaches prop classes to prepare students for a career in props, please visit our website or click the link in the chat to fill out our membership form. Someone from our membership committee will be in touch with more information. Spaminar is produced by the Society of Prop Managers with special thanks to Spam members Freed, Larry Heyman, Ben Homan, Stacy Horn Harper, Nikki Koulis, Amy Peter, Sarah Pugh, and Karen Robbie Vance, and of course Liz for being awesome with information this evening. Thanks again for watching, and once again, please keep your suggestions for future Spaminars coming. Fill out the survey that you're going to get in your email, please. We want to know what you want to learn about. Prop on, and we'll see you next time. Good night.